Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang namang sanghang namasami. So I'd like to start by offering my greetings and welcoming everyone this evening. So one of the inevitabilities in life is suffering, is discontent, is problems. And a lot of times, in life, these problems we have, it'll feel like the cause of them is outside, be it a problem with somebody, problem with some circumstances. But in Buddhism, one of the things we recognize and we look at is that a lot of the way we can fix this suffering is internally. So we don't always have the ability to control what's going on outside of us. We can't control who we interact with in the day-to-day life. We can't control what's going to happen to us, what kind of circumstances we'll get into. Sometimes, things feel like they're going great, and then something bad happens. Something bad might happen to someone we know. Something bad might happen to one of us. We can get in a car accident. Um, someone we know can get sick and die, or all kinds of different things can happen out of our control. But a lot of times we feel that the reason we're suffering is because of those. But when we come to practice Dhamma, we're coming to work on ourselves and change ourselves. And so even though we can't control what's happening outside of us, we can't control what's happening around us, we can control our own reactions. We can control our own the amount of suffering we experience ourselves. So there's this one story I really enjoy, and I probably tell it too much, is that the story of this great king or emperor, and he was going for a walk in a park, and he was walking, and he had a bunch of his ministers and all his attendants with him. And as he was walking in the park, he ends up stubbing his toe on a rock. And, everyone wants to take care of the king. Everyone there are, very close supporters of the king and his ministers. And so basically everyone starts kind of freaking out a bit. And they're like, oh, we can't have this happening. We can't have the king stubbing his toe. What are we going to do? How are we going to make sure this doesn't happen again? So they start deciding they're like, maybe what we should do is we should, cover the ground with leather. If there's soft leather covering all the ground, then there's no way he could stub his toe. We should just cover the whole world in leather. And then one of the ministers who had a little more wisdom than the other ones, uh, he said, no, no. What about instead of covering the whole world in leather, we just cover the emperor's foot in leather? So, it offers the same protection, and it's obviously a lot more practical and doable, and probably saves the lives of a lot of cows. And so, so this is, very much like a simile of what happens when we practice Dhamma, is that when we come here to change ourselves, and we're completely capable of our changing ourselves and improving ourselves. But sometimes when, people come to practice, they really have a lot of doubts in themselves and they don't feel they're able to change themselves. Some people might feel, oh, I'm a little too old, the whole can't teach an old dog new tricks, or for whatever reasons in their life, they may feel that they can't change, or it's too difficult to change, or something about their circumstances is unique and they're not able to change. But in the suttas and in the time of the Buddha, there was this one person, and he's quite a beloved character in the suttas. And he's beloved because he was very much that the story of in Christianity they'd say like the sinner redeemed. And so This was Angulimala. And so Angulimala, that's not actually his name. His name is Ahimsaka, which ironically means harmless or harmless one, or roughly something like that. And but he's known as Angulimala, and that's not his real name. That's his serial killer name because he was a serial killer. And same ideas like you'd have like Jack the Ripper or like the Night Stalker. That wasn't their real names. It was just their serial killer name. And so Angulimala, he killed 999 people. And after he'd kill people, what he'd do is he'd cut off their fingers and he'd keep one of their finger bones and he'd put it on this necklace he wore. And he'd have all the one finger bone from each of his victims as like a trophy or a memento to the people he had killed. So Anguli is finger, and Mala is like a garland or a necklace. So his name actually means like finger garland. And so he was a pretty bad guy. He was there's the whole story of he was kind of because of this religious sect he was in, he was kind of tricked into doing this. But at the end of the day, he was still doing it. He was still living in the forest, and he would attack these different caravans or travelers who would travel down the roads through the forest. And he was supposed to be quite a big, strong man. And he wouldn't just attack people on their own. He would attack groups of travelers, 5, 10, 20, 50 people. He'd attack them all at once and kill them. And and so sometimes we might hear something like that, like, okay, he killed 999 people like that. Oh, that's probably not possible. This is maybe just, kind of a made up story or a bit of an exaggeration. But there is even from the not too distant past, there is cases of this. There was a case in the Holy Roman Empire, which is now Germany, about 500 years ago of one person. I think his name was Peter Neers, and he did the same thing. He would kill people traveling through the forest, traveling down the highways, and he killed over 500. So it's completely possible, and it has happened other times in the past. And so um, uh, he was, of course, Angulimala was well known. The king sent out men looking for him, and he was just, everyone knew about him because he was such an awful like killer. And so the Buddha decided to go out and to teach Angulimala. The Buddha was able to realize and recognize that, Angulimala still had, a lot of spiritual potential. And so the Buddha went wandering and went looking for him. And all the villagers and lay people, would tell the Buddha, because, he was going on foot as it was done in the time. And all the villagers and lay people would tell the Buddha, don't go down that path, don't go that way. Angulimala's over there. They were all warning him to keep him safe. And this is actually still done nowadays. So a few years ago, I was on Tudong going through which is where monks we take our stuff and we just wander around. Usually sometimes with other people, sometimes on your own, but you just go by foot and you just kind of live day to day depending on alms food. You have a glot, which is a umbrella with a mosquito net, and you can just sleep kind of anywhere. It's in the cold season, so in that part of the country, there are no crops being planted, so people are completely cool with you sleeping in their fields or in little patches of forest. So it's a really great practice. But when I was on Tudong, every once in a while, I'd start walking and go to pass through an area. And the villagers would warn me too. They'd be like, "Oh, careful, careful, Ajahn, don't go down that way. There's a lot of like drug addicts in that area up there. And that's an area that they're trafficking drugs through. So stay away from it." I never listened to what they said though, but I was okay. No one bothered me. I guess no one saw me. But they would still warn like they did to the Buddha. But the Buddha, he didn't listen because he was going specifically to find Angulimala. And when he did, he was able to teach Angulimala. And Angulimala, gave up being a serial killer. And he ended up becoming a monk. And he ended up practicing and becoming enlightened, becoming an arahant. And so the Buddha actually, because of this, the Buddha even spoke to the king himself and got the king to stop hunting Angulimala, basically like, getting him a pardon. But pardon from the king is not the same as pardon from Kama. So he wasn't able to escape his Kama from what he had done. So when he would go on Bindabat and go into the village, people would throw stuff at him. They'd throw stones, they'd throw clods of dirt, like big chunks of hard dirt at him and stuff. And the Angulimala came back to the monastery and he was bloodied, he's bleeding, he's been hit with stuff. And he went to see the Buddha, and the Buddha just said to him, "Bear it, Brahmin." So like, and explained, this is your karma, this is your karma to bear. But you can see someone like Angulimala, who, again, a serial killer who had killed one person shy of 1,000 people, um, he was able to change. And so someone who had done all the things he had done, he was still able to change. So all of us, we're also able to change as well. But again, sometimes some people may come into it, maybe with some kind of guilt, or we can get really hard on ourselves. We can be really self-critical, really put ourselves down, and like to hold ourselves very lowly. And the stuff we can say to ourselves in our own minds is a lot worse than we'd ever say to anyone else. So a lot of people, can feel that, oh, I can't change. They may feel guilt over something they've done in the past. Oh, I did this terrible thing 20 years ago, and I'm such a bad person because of it. I can't change. Or they may even think that they don't deserve to be happy. Oh, I did this bad thing. I shouldn't be happy. I should have to suffer because of it. And that's not the case. You see, even with Angulimala, the Buddha taught him, he deserved to be happy. He did, to practice to become enlightened. And he was able to change after all the stuff he did. So no matter what you did and you don't think you can change, I guarantee it's not as bad as killing 999 people. So however bad you may think it was, trust me, people have done worse and still been able to change and improve themselves. And or sometimes when people want to change, maybe they want to go to the monastery, they want to go to a meditation retreat or join a Dhamma group or even an online thing like this. Sometimes they may not feel they're up to it yet. So you might feel, oh well, at the monastery they can all meditate really well. They can sit for really long periods of time, and I'm not there yet, so I just can't go because I don't feel I'm up to their level. But this is the place to learn how to do it. These are the places to learn. So if you're not up to it, actually, it's great to come out. It's the same idea as like going to the gym. Sometimes people will want to get in shape and get fit and go to the gym, but they'll kind of feel embarrassed going to the gym because they're not in shape, they're not fit yet. They almost want to get fit before they go to the gym because everyone around them they see is already fit and in shape. And that's, even though it's a feeling a lot of people get, it's a bit of a wrong view. It's like, nah, the gym is the place to go get fit and in shape. And just like, these Dhamma groups, these online groups, monasteries, they're the places to learn to practice. So it's open to people of all different skill levels. And so, once we, realize that we're able to change and want to change and decide that we're going to change, one of the things which is important is um knowing how to change, knowing what to change. So for me, and this is just my personal opinion and my personal view based on my own experience from myself and watching other people, is that one of the most important qualities for us when we start practicing Dhamma is this quality called Satcha Barami. So this is a Pali term. Parami, a lot of times we translate as perfections, but as far as I understand it, these are more like spiritual qualities or like personal qualities, personality traits that we're developing. And traditionally, there's a set of 10 of them. And so this one Satcha Barami, the Satcha, it's usually translated as truthfulness. I'm not a big fan of that translation of it because I think truthfulness conveys the idea of like not lying, so like telling the truth. But that's actually covered in a different barmi, in the Sila barmi, the one about our morality and stuff. So Satya barmi, the way I understand it and the way I like to translate it is more as like honesty. So this idea of really being honest, and not just honest with other people, but really honest with ourselves. And for a lot of people, this is really difficult. It's really difficult to really take an honest look at ourselves and be honest with ourselves about where we're at, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, where we need to improve. And Mei Chi Gao, who was this very famous nun in the 20th century in Thailand, she was a student of Luang Por Man and of Luang Tam Mahabua, and she had this beautiful quote about about being honest with ourselves. And one part of this quote was, you can lie to the whole world if you want, but never lie to yourself. And so she's not encouraging us to lie to other people. She's not saying it's okay to lie to the whole world, but she was saying that it's just to emphasize the importance of not lying to yourself because, we have to be able to see what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, what these areas we have to improve are. And so I remember many years ago when I was a junior monk living at Wat Mopjan, there was this one American monk from Wisconsin, and he's disrobed now, but he was a great monk. I liked him. I was friends with him, but his personality. So in Buddhism, it comes from the commentaries, but we have these like different personality types, and his personality type was just like the clearest, most like textbook example of what's called a dosa charita. So like an anger type. And so so he was very clear for everyone else to see. And one time, some of us monks were sitting around and talking, and another monk who had the same personality type made some comment. It was just, fun comment. It wasn't criticizing. He was like, yeah, dosage it's like us. We need to do this and this. And this American monk got so angry. He's like, I'm not a dosage Harriet. I'm not an anger type. And he was getting really angry about this. And no one else said anything because, it's like, oh, wow. And afterwards we were talking and it's like, really, he doesn't realize he's an anger type because sometimes it's really, really hard to either be honest with ourselves. And when we are being honest with ourselves, sometimes, it's hard to see where we're at and what we need to improve. And so, one of the important things then to help us with that is this idea of having good, what we call in Pali, Kalyana Mitta, or spiritual friends, or like our good friends or our Dhamma friends. And so, these are really important because they can help us because it's always easier to see someone else's faults than to see our own because we all have blind spots that we don't see, and having a good friend who's on this path with us, who's practicing with us, a Dhamma friend to point that out can be really good. So the Buddha, at one time, he was with his attendant Ananda, the Venerable Ananda, and the Venerable Ananda said to him, I think that having good friends, having Kalyana Mitta, I think this is like half of the holy life. And the Buddha said, no, 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 don't say that. Don't say that. It's not half of the holy life. It's the entirety of the holy life. So coming from the Buddha, this is really high praise. The Buddha was not one for like uh flattery or like false platitudes or exaggeration and stuff. So the Buddha really really put a lot of emphasis on this and a lot of importance on this having good friends, having your Dhamma friends. And so the so sometimes when we read the suttas, you listen to Kruba Ajahns, the different modern teachers, you read the suttas and stuff. And you think it almost seems like contradictory. You're like, okay, on one hand, the Buddha's talking about how important it is to have good friends, to have our like Dhamma friends. But on the other hand, he's always saying, go live in solitude, go live by yourself, go find the root of a tree, the empty huts, really go find a quiet place to live. These don't seem to add up. But but one of the things is like you're not always living by yourself, and having these other friends to offer support to really encourage you. So Lumpur Biek, he would talk about this when I lived with him. because I ordained in the tradition of Ajahn Chah, Lumpur Cha. We call it the Wapapong tradition. And one of the differences between the Wapapong tradition and a lot of other Thai forest traditions and a lot of other monasteries of the Thai forest tradition is we do a lot more group practice, especially in the beginning in your training phase. When we always get lots of time to spend alone and spend off in the forest by ourselves or all these different places. But especially in the beginning training, we do a lot of it together as a group, as a community, as a sangha. So we get up in the morning, we do morning chanting together, we sit meditation together, we do chores together, we do evening meditation and chanting together, and all these things we do together. And Lumpur Biek was saying the reason that we do these things together is to support each other. And he was saying, back in the old days, back with the really old generation disciples of Lumpur Man, he was saying like people like Lumpur Sam, Lumpur Tate, Lumpur Fun, for a lot of them, right when they ordained, they already had uh, a lot of paramis, a lot of these good spiritual qualities already. And so for a lot of them, it was very easy right after they ordained, they could just go into the forest and sit for 5 hours in meditation, no problem. And for us, it's not like that. Most of us, it's not like that, especially in the beginning. So Lumpur Cha had us practice together to support each other. And I could really see this for myself when I arrived at the monastery. So when I arrived, I was 21, kind of a scattered, overactive teenager. And at that time there was a different abbot, and his style was to do the no group practice, was just all on your own and stuff. And for where I was at the time, it was very difficult for me. So in the morning, the morning bell would ring at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd always get up to meditate, and I'd start sitting, and after a little bit, my back would get sore, and so I think, okay, I'm just gonna lie down for a few minutes, just rest my back, but I'm gonna keep meditating, keep my mindfulness on my breath. And every time I'd end up falling asleep and then waking up a couple hours later for the morning alms round, the morning bindabat. But then we had a change of habits, and we went back to the more traditional style of Ajahn Chah's style of training. So, doing the group meditation and the group chanting. And I found I was able to stay up when we were doing that. So having that support of friends and support of a community. And when you wake up and you're really tired, and you're like, oh, maybe I should just go back to bed. But all your friends are in the meditation hall, in the sala, doing the chanting and meditation. So you don't want to let them down. And so it's one of those things, parents really see this a lot when their kids, especially when they start getting into the teenage years. One of the biggest worries for parents is that their kids are going to get into the wrong group of friends, get into the wrong crowd. And because we can recognize how having peers, they can, if they're the wrong friends, not your good friends, not your Kalyanamitta, they can really drag you down. But so the opposite is true. Having these good friends, having these Kalyanamitta, they can really bring us up. They can really encourage us to do better and to better ourselves. And so, having that support of friends is really good. And also, one of the things they can do, kind of bringing it back to what I was saying earlier, is that they can point out to us those things we can't see, point out to us, those little places where we have little flaws or our little blind spots. But it's really good when you have that kind of relationship with someone else, that you can point out something to them or they can point out something to you, to really be careful around it, to really be have a lot of wisdom around it, and really get, because even if you're saying something which is true, and they've asked you to say it, if you say it in the wrong time or in the wrong place, you can really it can go over completely wrong. So when you're doing it, you have to make sure you know the person, what they can what kind of criticism they can handle, the proper ways to say it to them, and getting the right time and place. So Yeah, this is really important. And for monks, when we have all these rules about how to uh, we always use the translated as admonish, which I think is maybe not the best translation because again, it comes off sounding very, very heavy, but it's really just pointing out things to each other and pointing out if someone's breaking a rule or they're doing something wrong. But for us as monks, we have rules about how to do it. So, it's got to be factual. It's got to be with a heart of loving kindness. So you're not pointing something out to someone to try to hurt them. You're doing it to really try to help them, to try to encourage them. One of the things as monks is we actually have to ask the other person. You've got to be like, you know, is it okay if I point something out to you? I've noticed something. Because you don't always know where the other person is at. So even if outside they look good, there might be something really going on in their life or going on inside. So they may have maybe just found out a relative has died or got some kind of bad news, or maybe they're just going through a tough time in life. So it's really important to ask that, and then they can, give you leave, like give you permission, be like, yeah, yeah, tell me anything. And so I find there's this real strong importance of having good friends, having sachavarami, honesty with yourselves. And then this can really help us in trying to change ourselves, trying to improve ourselves, and really trying to put an end to all the stress and suffering in our own lives. So I'd like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection this evening.